chaos back into order. Who makes the orphan a son and a daughter? The King of Glory, the King of Glory, who rules the nations with truth and justice. Shines like the sun in all of its brilliance. The King of Glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is a failing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, and I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me.
He's worthy of our praise this morning. Sing this out to him.
Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy. Oh, this is amazing grace. This is a failing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. All that you've done for me. All that you've done for me.
His grace is amazing, and he's their anchor in the storm. No matter what you're going through, God's there for you. All you have to do is call out to him. In every season, in every change, you are near. In every sorrow, you are my strength, you are near. The peace in the storm, your voice I will follow. In weakness I rise, remembering you are my world. I'm holding on to hope, holding on to grace, fully letting go. I'm surrendered to your ways, the anchor for my soul. Father, you will never change. I love you. I love you. My constant friend, you are near. come to you today and we just praise your name, God. God, today we just love you. And we are thankful for your victory over sin and death. God, we love you and we praise you today.
Takes away our sins, who takes away our sins. Oh, God makes us alive again, makes us alive again. Behold the Lamb of God, who takes away our sins, who takes away our sins. The Holy Lamb of God makes us alive again, makes us alive again. Though your love shed for me, though your blood it crimson streams, though your name is housed in me. My victory, the cross meant to kill is my victory.
In the crushing, in the pressing, you are making new wine. In the sword line, now surrender, you are breaking new ground. So I yield to you and to your care. trust you, I don't need to understand. So make me a vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. I came here with nothing, but all you have given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. In the crushing, in the pressing, you are making new wine. In the soil I surrender, you are breaking new ground. You are breaking new ground. So make me a vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. Came here with nothing, but all you have given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Where there is new wine, there is new power, there is new freedom. Kingdom is here. Lay down my old plans, carry your new fire today. There is new wine, there is new power, there is new freedom. The kingdom is here. Lay down my old plans, carry your new fire today. So make me a vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. I came here with nothing, but all you have given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me.
Let us pray. God, we come to you today and we just praise your holy name, God. God, we are thankful for your love and your mercy. God, we just ask that you would just make us into what you want us to be. God, today we lay our sin and our sorrows at your feet. God, we thank you for just loving us unconditionally. God, we ask that just your Holy Spirit would fill this room and touch all those that are here. God, we thank you for our moms today and what they mean in their lives. Just lead and guide us and always help us to do your will. Give us the boldness and courage to tell others about you. We ask all these things in your holy name. Amen. And you may be seated.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome, I think I heard Freddie say good morning, Maddie. I'd like to welcome you guys to Destination Community Church. Thank you so much for being with us today. If you're a first-time guest, we're just honored that you're here. If you were brought here by your mother, or if you brought your mother, or whatever the case may be, we're just glad you're here. And we do because it is Mother's Day. It's a special day. I would like to ask for those who are available to stand, mothers, grandmothers, stepmothers, if you're a guardian that fills that role of a mother, would you please stand just so that we can acknowledge you and what you do? Thank you. No, you have to stand the whole service. I'm just kidding. You can sit down. We also want to recognize that this is a very difficult day for some of you that are here today that have lost a mother, you've lost a child. It doesn't matter if this is the first year. Sometimes it can be 15 years. It can be 30 years. It's extremely difficult. There are also some ladies in here that have possibly had miscarriages, and others that in the past you recognize that you made a mistake that you live with every day, maybe having an abortion, and that's something that the guilt just absolutely eats you away. I do want you to know that we serve a God of grace and a God of mercy, but for those people that are in here that are really struggling today, there's Brian's insulin pump right on cue. And for those of you that are in here and you're struggling today because of a loss, I'd like to have just a short moment of silence to remember those individuals. All right. We're in part 3 of a series called Love, Sex, and Dating. And I can promise you that it was not my intention to talk about the best sex on Mother's Day. That's just kind of the way that it worked out, and that's what we're going to talk about today. The last couple Sundays have been pretty difficult, some difficult stuff to stomach or to swallow for a lot of people in the church. And I can promise you it's not necessarily been the easiest stuff to teach. But today is going to be a little bit more lighthearted. Today is going to be a little bit more fun. And if it's the first time that you're here, we're spending 5 weeks discussing love and the role of sex in relationships. And our desire is to give the single person, but also the married person, the best picture of sex possible while directing the dating life of the single person as something meaningful. You guys have the opportunity, those of you that are in here that are single right now, and this could mean that you're 15, 16 years old. It could mean that you're 60 or 70 years old. It really doesn't matter. You have the opportunity to make some decisions that are really going to impact the rest of your life. And some of the consequences for the wrong decisions are very, very destructive. So we want to make you aware of some of those things, of how real this is and what this looks like, so that you can have the best possible guide and the best possible outcome within this situation. Also want to give you guys a little bit of a note that even though it's Mother's Day and some of your younger kids might be in here right now, we do have a kids ministry, because if I had to give this a rating, we would say it's PG-13. It's fine for your teenagers. It's fine for older kids and obviously young adults. But we do want to make sure that we're not saying anything or sharing anything in here that could be a little bit difficult or sensitive for kids that are a little bit smaller. Because when we do share some of these things, we know that we have to get a little bit more explicit than maybe we normally would. So a little bit of a recap with where we've been. The problem that we've identified, and the reason that we feel the need to do this series, is because we feel that the cultural narrative has really been what's revealed or what's been shown to us as what sex is supposed to look like in society. Now the thing is, this is not just in society, it has also crept into the church. 3rd week in a row that we're looking at this. And listen, like I said, this is not just what your friends outside of church are talking about as far as the views of what sexuality and sex and relationships is supposed to look like. This is how a lot of people in the church actually view this as well. So this is what we say. We say that sex is instinctual or biological. Now, we know that obviously sex is biological, but what we're saying here is that basically we are mammals. We are made to have sex. Whenever we have a desire to have sex, that just means that we should fulfill that desire. That's the way that life is supposed to be. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So whenever we feel this need, we go have sex. All right, also the media and also other social institutions and our social environment teaches us that sex can be casual and is about pleasure. Now, I would agree, pleasure is a very important part of sex, but it's not supposed to be casual. But the understanding that we have, last week we talked about sex gone wrong and hookup culture and kind of what this looks like and some of the problems that are associated with this. But for people who have a really big problem with those two, they sometimes don't have a problem with this third one. And it says sex is okay if we care about or really love the person. You know, we've been with this person for 3 months. That's marriage pretty much to people today. Like that's a lifetime. So if I'm having sex in this relationship, that is perfectly fine. That's no big deal whatsoever. We're practically married. We're already engaged. We live together. And this is what society has told us over and over. So again, point that I'll make is it is not something that you just see on TV or something that you hear on a podcast or something that you see on YouTube. This is something that has actually crept into the church so that people that call themselves Christians just see these sexual ethics as the norm. Whereas the biblical perspective of sex, which is often just kind of being swept under the rug anymore, is very important, and we don't have a strong understanding of it. If we're going to go forward in the right way and in the most positive way, we have to deal with this issue, and we have to look at this very, very closely. The first thing that we would identify is that sex is for marriage, period. It bothers me. I talked about this last week when people say that, well, it's just a piece of paper. It's not just a piece of paper. It's literally a life-giving institution. It's the first social institution that we have in Scripture. It is absolutely critical. The vows that you make, the way that you live within your marriage, every single bit of this is very, very important, and it's also intimately tied to our sexual relationship with our spouse. Leading into that, we said that sex is sacred or sex is holy. Sex is something that is supposed to be set apart from other things. So while we always look at the physical dynamic within a sexual relationship, there is actually something that God is doing within sex, within the process, and within the story of sex over time that has very, very, very strong biblical undertones. In fact, I would say that it's central. And that also leads to this idea that sex was invented by God. And we also said in week 1, we said this is the thing that makes sexual sin different than other sins. Not only is whenever you commit sexual sin, you're sinning against your body, but it's even deeper than that. Sin takes sex and takes something, turns something that is supposed to be beautiful into something that actually becomes corruptible. All right, so whenever we talk about lying, stealing, cheating, gossiping, whatever it might be, this whole host of sins or things that we shouldn't do, in their origins, they're already bad. But what sin does to sex is it takes something that is supposed to be beautiful. It's supposed to be special. It's supposed to be sacred. There is a divine order within this relationship, and it actually turns it into something that is not only ugly, and not only distorted, but something that is actually corruptible, something that has the ability to destroy us, something that has the ability to destroy our future. And this is something that happens on a pretty regular basis. So it should be no surprise to us whenever we talk about sex as something invented by God for very, very specific purposes and for a very specific reason. So if you're in here and you're single, it's important to understand that. It's also equally important to understand that whenever we take it out of its context and whenever we do it the wrong way, we have the ability to damage our lives in ways that we can't even begin to imagine. Now, as I see heads kind of nodding in here, the reason that you're doing that is because some of you did it the right way. And because you did it the right way, you wish you could grab some of these teenagers in here, or maybe even people who have recently went through a divorce that are making really bad decisions now, whatever that might look like, and say, this is the way that it's supposed to look. But there are also others of you that are in here right now, and you know what I'm talking about with the consequences, because you've had to live with those. You've had to admit to your spouse, who maybe lived a very good, wholesome, clean life, that you've slept with this person and that person and this person and that person. In a small town, if you're from here, you have to deal with the run-ins in town. You have to deal with all of those things that you never anticipated as a single person. This stuff is very, very, very real. And it's also very damaging. So what is it that makes sex beautiful? What is it that makes sex what it's supposed to be? And if there is a reason for sex, if there is a purpose for sex, if God invented this thing for us to enjoy, what is it actually supposed to look like? Here are 4 things that we're going to look at here in just a second. But I want to say this. There are all these other subcategories that could be compartmentalized and fall into one of these 4 areas. But the argument that I want to make for you today is that the best sex is going to look exactly like this. Now, if you don't want to have kids, if kids are not something on your radar, I'm not necessarily saying procreation has to happen, but these other 3 certainly have to be a part of the sexual experience if you are doing it the right way. Now, the problem that we run into more than anything, especially in a hookup culture, is that we've really got the 4th one down. Everybody is excited about the 4th one. Everybody loves the 4th one. And let's just think about it. Whenever you're trying to meet someone or you're trying to hook up, I don't care if you're at a bar, if you're online, wherever it may be, you're not saying to yourself, I am seeking a divine union with someone tonight, and it's got to happen tonight. That's not what you're saying, and I sure hope you're not trying to procreate, all right? So what you're typically thinking about is physical pleasure. So sometimes we want to pull that out of the category and say physical pleasure is not something that should be part of it, but it actually is. So these are the 4 things that are critical that we're going to talk about. And if you're in here and you are single, as far as a future, as far as looking at what this is supposed to look like and happiness in your life, I want you to keep these 4 things in mind. Now, there's also the likely possibility that you're married right now and you're willing to say, you know what, divine union, I don't even know what that means. That's definitely not in my marriage. And you may be in here right now and you're saying physical pleasure, somebody's feeling it, but it's not me. And that's not present in my marriage. You know, so there could be one of these, or companionship. It's like this critical thing in which you're supposed to connect with another person on a soul level. And it's also not present in a lot of marriages. So we're talking to dating people about what you want in the future, but we're also talking to married couples that may feel that some of this is not present, all right? And another thing that I would say to you if you are single, the standard that God makes is very, very high. And it's beautiful because it's high. And the standard that culture has is very, very low. And that's why sex looks like no different than a trip to the convenience store or planning a vacation or planning out your week. It's as casual as almost anything that you could possibly imagine. All right, so the first thing that we're going to look at is this concept and this idea that I feel like is missing from a lot of marriages that cannot be missing from a faith-based marriage. And if you're in the dating world, you need to be seeking a partner that is seeking this exact same thing. This is what Genesis 2:24 says, and we were in this the first week, all right? And I'm going to beat this one flesh thing to death. I talk about it all the time because it's so critical. In premarital counseling, in marriage counseling, in dating, if people are asking me what I feel like the relationship is supposed to look like, these are critical things that are always mentioned, all right? And also, I feel that Genesis, both 1 and 2, as far as love is concerned, relationships, marriage, the way that we're supposed to treat our spouses, I believe that everything that we need is found in the groundwork of creation. It's right there for us. And if we can just make the right kind of decisions and we can pay attention, we can have a really, really healthy marriage and a good life. So Genesis 2:24 says, that is why a man leaves his father and his mother and is united with his wife, and they become one flesh. So what I'm saying when I say one flesh is that whenever I married my wife, and this is an analogy that I use a lot of time, I tend to be a selfish, self-absorbed person that has had to recognize and continue to recognize over time, as she has to recognize these things, that we are no longer our own. We are literally connected in every possible way. And whenever I make decisions, it has an impact on her. And whenever she makes decisions, it has an impact on me. And everything that we talk about, from occupations to parenting and all of this stuff, there's an understanding that we are part of the same thing and we're doing that together. Now, on an even deeper level, when we look at this idea of the divine union and the spiritual, this goes much, much deeper into our one flesh relationship with Christ and into our relationship with God that directs absolutely everything we have. I often have young people, and by young people I mean teenagers and people mostly in their 20s. If they're teenagers, I send them to Pastor Alex because I can't even face what they're going through sometimes. All right? But I have these young people come to me and they say, my boyfriend wants to have sex or my girlfriend wants to have sex, and if we don't have sex, they act like to me we are going to break up. We've talked about the pressure with this. I can promise you right now that this is not God's best for you. If you are in that situation and that pressure is being applied, and there's a possibility that someone is going to break up with you if you don't make the decision to continue with that, you are going to have problems in that relationship if it's something that continues, and it's not what God wants for your life. And you're going to tell yourself, because of all these wonderful emotional feelings, well, she really loves me, well, he really loves me, well, there's a possibility that God must be in this because God brought this person into my life at this time. If it does not line up with what is right here in the teachings that we have about sexuality, I can promise you that it is not of God. And you can work up all of these feelings within you. So if we're going to experience this direction, this intimate connection that we read about in Genesis, this divine union where God is directing everything that we do, there has to be this understanding. So sex within the marital covenant, all right, this kind of intimacy is the deepest thing that you are ever going to experience. Anything outside of that, even though temporarily it may feel like a wonderful thing, and I do believe that you can fall in love with someone in the process outside of this plan that I'm talking about, there are going to be consequences for the believer. So again, I've tried to say through this series so far that I'm talking to two separate groups. All right? If you are not a Christian, if you're kind of on the outside of this, you're just not certain, you're a skeptic, you're here just because you're curious or someone invited you or whatever, this teaching that I'm talking about doesn't necessarily apply to you. But I'm talking to individuals that are saying, I want what's best for me one day whenever I get married. Or we are married, but we know that we are not having the best possible sex. Or maybe you say, we're not having sex at all. Like that, don't raise your hand or don't say amen or don't do anything uncomfortable, all right? But that is what, you can nudge your spouse, all right? That's okay. But there's that's obviously going on as well. So God gives us this sacred union and gives us an understanding of what it's supposed to look like. And God shows this in the Old Testament, and then Jesus teaches it, and then Paul follows him and teaches it, and they are teaching that sex is meant to be exclusive with one person, your spouse, unbreakable, and for marriage alone. This is the plan, and this is going to lead to the best sex possible. Now, point 2, procreation. All right, procreation or having children. If you have small children in here, hold their ears because babies do come from sex and not a garden or not a stork or not flowers or not anything else. All right, I think most of us that are adults know that. We're not scratching our heads. We're going a little bit earlier in Genesis, and we want to see this right here. God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. I'm telling you, as a dad of 3 kids, I am not filling the earth anymore. All right? I am done filling the earth. This having 3 has been a leap from 2 that I can't, some of you may know exactly what Kevin is nodding right now. We are done filling the earth. All right? But that is why we have children, all right? To fill the earth. This is an old idea, and we know that this is a result of sex. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground. Now, if you have had sex outside of wedlock and have a child as a result, I want you to know that that child is as loved by God and has as much capability as any other child that's ever been born. All right, so please understand that first. Also, as I just said, it does not mean that you have to have, in fact, this is the one that you could potentially take out. You don't have to have children to have the best sex possible. All right, so I don't want you to think, is he saying that if we're going to have the best sex, we have to have kids? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But for those of you that are in here and are parents, you know what this experience has done for your marriage. And you know what this experience has done for your relationship with your spouse. All right, so I can tell you this. I have been fortunate to go to some pretty cool places and see some pretty cool things. And I was thinking about this as I was preparing for this. And I remember the first time that I ever saw the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican City in Italy and looked up and just thought about all the work, as Michelangelo was on his back for years, painting. And I thought about been to the Anne Frank house and Beethoven's house and Nelson Mandela's house in Africa, and got to see Michael Jordan play in his prime whenever I was young and experience all these wonderful things. But I have never experienced anything, and I know that there are some individuals in here that will agree, some may disagree, but I've never seen anything like my children being born. It is the most beautiful thing that I have ever experienced in my life. Now, when my daughter Cora was born, I was scared to death of what this was going to be like, because my oldest daughter is my stepdaughter, and I'd never witnessed this. Now, I like to research, as you probably know, all right, and I like to be as prepared as I possibly. No, I didn't go see any other babies be born, if that's what you want. But I did watch a heck of a lot of YouTube videos, all right? And I'm watching this stuff, and I'm thinking, this is disgusting. There is no way that I'm going to be able to handle this. I was a nervous wreck. I knocked ice chips all over the room, and the nurses were slipping and sliding all over the place. But whenever she was born, I watched the entire thing, probably a little too close. But I'm not going to I need to be careful about what I say today, all right? So I watched this and I was like, this is the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen in my life. I didn't feel bothered. I didn't feel sick. I didn't feel anything. It was the most incredible thing that I've ever seen. And then when my son was born here recently, just a couple months ago, I had this expectation, this excitement, because I knew at this point exactly what to experience. And then when he was out, I said, I never want to experience this again. So we're done. But obviously, your children are no less significant if they didn't happen in this situation, but we know the significance of procreation. We know the importance of having children and what children can be and how significant this is to the sexual relationship. Now, the next thing that I want to mention, and I think this is critical for absolutely every marriage, and this is the importance of companionship. All right, the importance of companionship. And something that I shared with our first group this morning is that I come from a scientific background, and I had the view for many years that I could probably, if I ever did get married, end up with a number of different people that shared some of the characteristics that I have, and that was like how a compatible marriage would actually work. All right, but since that time, my view has completely changed, because there is no doubt in my mind that my wife is my soulmate, because I don't think anybody else would ever put up with me. First, all right, I'll say that first. But also, it's like the areas that I struggle, she has this balance and this way of helping me. In the areas that she struggles, I'm able to do that for her. And there's this connectedness. Like, one of my greatest fears, one of the greatest things that I struggle with is if something happens to her, I'm going to be like that weird guy in the convenience store with all the keys right here and the styrofoam cup and the, never mind, all right? But that I am just not going to be able to do it because I am that connected to her in that way. So this companionship is absolutely critical. Now, the place that I think that we see this the strongest and the best in the Bible is in the Song of Songs, or in the Song of Solomon. I want to make you a promise right now. If you've read the Song of Songs or the Song of Solomon and you've read the rest of the Bible, it doesn't read like the rest of the Bible. Okay, it reads like a Danielle Steele novel. Not that I've ever read one. All right, but you're going to notice this and you're going to recognize this because it's much, much, much different language. Okay, so this is what we see. Song of Solomon chapter 3 and verse 1 through 4 as we talk about. This doesn't even seem like the Bible. Let me go ahead and say this, okay? Restless in bed and sleepless through the night, I longed for my lover. All right, this is pretty much, Beth, this is our story, all right? I wanted him desperately. His absence was painful. I got up and went out and roved the city of Prestonsburg, hunting through the streets and down alleys. I wanted my lover in the worst way. I looked high and low and didn't find him. And then the night watchman. Do we have night watchmen? I don't think so. Then the night watchmen found me as they patrolled the darkened star city. Have you seen my dear lost love? I asked. They found me at Billy Ray's. But anyway, all right. No sooner had I left them, I found him. I found my dear lost love. I threw my arms around him and held him tight. Wouldn't let him go until I had him home again, safe at home beside the fire. Again, nothing like the rest of the Old Testament and nothing like the New Testament, but deeply, deeply intimate language about the importance of relationship and about the importance of companionship. And sex is not a small part of this. Sex is absolutely central to what this is supposed to look like. So as unexplicit as I could possibly be, these are some of the things that we gain from this kind of companionship when it's done in the biblical order, in the right way. It leads to an intimacy that you cannot replicate. You simply cannot replicate, and it does not matter how close you may feel that you are to someone. It cannot be replicated in any possible way whenever it's done like this. It fosters a sense of knowing and caring for the other person that you simply cannot replicate. And this is a situation in a relationship as it grows over time, whenever you begin to learn that what they want or what they need becomes more important than what you need. And that relationship is a reciprocal relationship that goes both ways in its entirety. Is sex involved in this? It's central. Is Jesus involved in this, in your relationship with God? It's absolutely central. And some of you that are married already, some of you that are single should be saying, I want this. I desire this. This is something that I crave for my own life. But others of you are saying, we just simply don't have this. This is not what our marriage looks like. So you have to ask some questions. Where are we in our relationship with Christ together? And what do things look like on the sexual front? And what do things look like from the perspective of companionship and how much we care about one another? It's also going to build a foundational trust that you cannot replicate. In week 5, whenever we specifically address married couples, we're going to talk just a little bit more about divorce and kind of what that looks like in the United States, because in the past, finances were the primary reason. Today, it's infidelity. And we'll look at what that looks like, because this foundational trust that is needed, that is absolutely necessary in a marriage, you shouldn't have to always check your spouse's phone. You shouldn't always have to check the websites that your spouse has been on. You shouldn't have to worry who your boyfriend or who your girlfriend has been talking to on Facebook or Snapchat or whatever it might be, or what pictures they've liked or anything like that. When marriage is done the right way and the sexual relationship is what it is supposed to be, that foundational trust is being built in a very, very strong, practical way over time. And this is so much more than physical pleasure. It's so much more than friendship or physical bonding. It is this otherworldly union. It falls into that divine union category. It's this otherworldly connectedness that you simply don't get anywhere else. Now again, if you're a college student and you're in here right now, or you're a high school student, these are the things that you're supposed to desire. And if you're a parent in here right now to one of these kids, you should be paying close attention, because you should tell your child that they should never settle for anything less than what this is and what this is supposed to look like. So sex within the covenant of marriage that is built on the foundation of Christ is unlike any other form of companionship, friendship, closeness with a person that you are ever going to experience. Fourth point we want to make today, and the last one, physical pleasure. Again, we are often told that we are not supposed to experience any kind of physical pleasure, that it's just not supposed to be part of our sexual relationships at all. And that couldn't possibly be further from the truth. In fact, just to be completely honest, I don't really know how it's possible to not physically enjoy it. That's what it's for every human being. But within the context of marriage, done exactly the right way. Song of Solomon, we're getting just a little bit deeper here. All right? Kiss me. full on the mouth. Yes, not going to scream it. Yes. For your love is better than wine, headier than your aromatic oils. I don't even know what that means, but it sounds wonderful. All right? The syllables of your name, this is what Beth says, the syllables of your name murmur like a meadow brook. My name's only one syllable, so I don't know how that works. No wonder everyone loves to say your name. Take me away with you. Let's run off together. Does this sound realistically like anyone's marriage? Take me away with you. Let's run off together. An elopement with my king lover. We'll celebrate. We'll sing. We'll make great music. This is how I know it's not our marriage. Yes, for your love is better than vintage wine. Have you ever had vintage wine? Too many people are settling for Boone's Farm or for boxed wine, right? You're settling for the cheap stuff. You need some 1982, all right? Everyone loves you, of course. And why not in a situation like that? The important component that we have, y'all know what Boone's Farm is, right? Yeah. All right. The important component that we always have to remember is that there is absolutely nothing wrong with physical pleasure. Can you imagine a situation in which you're with your spouse and your spouse says, "How was it for you?" "Well, I guess it was okay, but I tried not to enjoy it too much." No one says that, all right? And that is not the Christian response to this. Because we understand within the context of this relationship that sex is for marriage, that sex is sacred, and that sex was invented by God. And whenever you can pull the companionship and the divine union and the procreation, whenever you pull these things together, physical pleasure makes perfect sense, but physical pleasure never makes sense on its own. Physical pleasure is not meant to exist on an island. And for the majority of relationships, especially last week, whenever we talked about this prevalent and growing hookup culture in society, physical pleasure is never supposed to exist in that way. So Solomon refers to the physical as vintage wine. And some of us are settling for much, much, much less. So what is it that we do with all this information? If we have an understanding of what sex is supposed to look like, but we're not quite meeting that mark, it typically means just one of a few things. Within our marriage, our relationship with Christ is not where it's supposed to be. And your relationship with your spouse is never going to be where it's supposed to be if your relationship with Christ is not where it's supposed to be. Because you're not going to have an understanding of what mutual submission looks like. You're not going to have an understanding of what it looks like to meet another person's needs. You're not going to understand what the sexual relationship and the sexual dynamic with your spouse is supposed to look like. And I'm telling you guys that are in here right now that are single, that are dating, if I had this information whenever I would have been much younger, it could have changed and impacted a lot of different areas of my life. Because there are people that are in here right now, and you know that because of the decision that you made, your marriage is holy, and your marriage is pure. And then there are others of you that are in here right now, and you know that whenever you go to a certain restaurant and you run into that person, it's going to be an argument, because that's a woman or that's a man from the past. And sometimes it's multiple partners, and you see, when you're out having fun, and when you're out using the cultural narrative that the world gives us, the future spouse, none of this is a reality. None of this are things that you're talking about. It's all about what you can do in the moment. But I can promise you that as those rocks start to tumble, and as you step into a future with a person that you care about, some of those wounds are going to come up. So we want to prevent that as much as we possibly can. And this is the first time. Today is actually my 3-year anniversary here. And I think that this is the first time that I've ever done this. But I want to introduce reintroduce the same challenge that I gave you guys last week, because I feel like it's something that people are still dealing with and something that we need to look at very carefully. So the first thing, you may be married, you may be single, but this is something that we talked about a lot last week. But I want some of you in here to really pray about and think about making the decision to abandon pornography today. Because you are not going to be able to have the best sex. You are not going to be where you need to be in your relationship with your spouse, or even looking toward the future as these images are constantly distorting through your mind until you make this decision. And again, like we said last week, to simply ask you to abandon pornography without giving you resources would be foolish. Some of you can leave here today, never look at porn again, and be absolutely fine. There are others of you in here who, like with alcohol or drugs or maybe food or some other form of addiction, you need more help. And that's why we provided these resources that you have again on your outline today. CovenantEyes.com is a website in which you have accountability, and it's also going to block any kind of pornographic images that come, as well as websites that come up on your computer, your phone, your tablet, whatever it is that you have. PureDesire.com offers groups that you can be part of, as well as other kinds of resources, and a podcast. We've also mentioned that in September, we are going to launch our Celebrate Recovery. And with our Celebrate Recovery, about 50% of the people that are involved have a past with drugs or alcohol, or both. About 25% of the people are there for mental health issues, if it's anxiety or depression or obsessive compulsive disorder or any kind of issue, codependency, whatever. And then about 25% of the people that are there are for sexual issues, if it's sex addiction, if it's struggling with lust, if it's pornography, whatever it might be. I also showed you guys some statistics to look at and talk about the reality of how much this has grown in the church. It's absolutely everywhere. We also mentioned that we have our own recovery small group. So there are some of you, if your relationship, if you're going to experience this divine union, if you're going to have the companionship that you need with your spouse, this is the first place that you actually have to start. And if you're younger and you're not married yet and you're dating and you're trying to figure all this out, this has the ability to completely destroy your future. And if you don't believe me, there are people in this church that you could actually ask. The second thing is this: I'm going to save myself for marriage. We've talked about what the best sex is supposed to look like. And the critical part of that I believe really directs all of it is this divine union. This relationship that not only you have with Jesus, but that you have this beautiful and amazing opportunity to share with someone else. So if you're in here and you're single today and you're a Christian, the greatest prayer that I think that you can pray that is going to be the biggest benefit to your future that I want my children to pray is, God, please help me not to settle for anything less than what you want in my life. The writing has been on the wall for the last 3 weeks about what some of the problems are that we go across and that we face. And then also, I'm going to commit myself to purity beginning today. And by purity beginning today, it means that some of you, because of your age or because of good choices, you're already pure. But it also means that some of you have made some really, really poor decisions, and you wonder where you fall into this conversation. And the beautiful thing about the mercy and the grace and the love of God is that you have the opportunity to freshly begin today and say, you know what, I know I've made some mistakes. I know that I've been in some pretty toxic relationships. I know that I have a children, maybe from a marriage in which I wasn't married. And just so you know, we love those children so much. But I want today to start doing things a little bit differently. And if I get married again, or if I'm in a situation, never been married, and I'm going to marry one day, I want to do this the right way. I stress this, and I stress this series because I've suggested that I believe the thing that we struggle with the most is not greed or selfishness or anger or gossip or stealing or all these other significant things that are important, but sexual sin. And until we make the decision that we are going to do nothing but accept God's best for our lives and be willing to wait on that, pursue that, and go through the process of that if we're already married, the struggle is going to continue. Will you pray with me? Father, we come to you this morning and we lift up again and just thank you for all of the wonderful mothers that are in the room right now.